For hardware as a service, most sales models, products, and services have a natural life cycle, as you may know, but rarely is that life cycle a loop. Instead, the life cycle is often what is called an S-curve. Initially, sales are low and adoption is slow. Sales will steadily increase and rise, and profitability rises along with it until the product reaches its peak, the height of its popularity. From there, it begins to decline, and as it becomes old and an outdated model, and then is abandoned for something new and better. Eventually, that becomes obsolete as well. An example would be PCs and the big box stores. So if you recall, you used to be able to make a boatload of money selling PCs in the past. So much, in fact, that you could give away your installation and your service for free. But those days have long passed as big box stores slashed the margins on computers, and that spelled the death of that particular sales model. But on the heels of that model was then the break-fix model, where companies began charging for ad hoc services that they would add on to help distinguish themselves from the big box stores. That was the start of a new curve, an S-curve. But now selling your services on an as-needed basis is also rapidly declining, and it's being replaced with managed services, offering a budgeted monthly price for unlimited access to services. Moving from one of these mindsets or models is known as curve jumping, and it does require a complete shift in your mindset as a business owner or reseller of technology products and services. So what is the next curve for the IT channel? Aside from the technology changes like security and the Internet of Things, the as-a-service model is being adopted globally as the next product and services delivery method. The signs are pointing to this with the growing popularity of monthly payments. Hardware as a service, or I'm going to abbreviate it somewhat throughout the presentation and call it HaaS, is a proven business model for managed service providers, resellers, and technology solution providers. It is the delivery of information technology, hardware, and infrastructure, along with the related proactive maintenance and support as a consumption-based monthly subscription service. It's a simple concept. You sell a total solution to your customer. They get the hardware, the software, the installation, training, and consulting, and of course, it all comes fully supported and managed for a simple monthly fee. For a traditional hardware reseller, the shift to a service model can be challenging. New capacities in software and service deployment must be developed. The customer experience must be redesigned around service rather than a product, a thing, or hardware. Companies also must learn how to build value through all of the data that flows through a connected system of things. Hardware as a service offers many advantages for managed service providers, resellers, and technology solutions providers. First, you can increase your gross margins on the hardware and your service. Straight product or hardware resale has a relatively low gross margin. You can do better by offering HaaS. You also can work to standardize your customer base, which has many benefits to your business model. You can get clients to immediately transition to new technology standards as part of onboarding without the capital expense of buying new equipment. Instead, customers have a lower monthly operating expense that they pay out over time. You also can improve your customer stickiness. Hardware as a service creates this greater customer stickiness compared to annual or month-to-month service contracts with cash sales. All of this leads to creating and improving your monthly recurring revenue. While hardware as a service has many upsides, It does have a few downsides, including the unique ability to cripple cash flow in your business. The traditional model of a hardware as a service program is to use the business's operating cash to purchase the equipment needed for customer projects. Then you would rent it to the customer along with your managed service fees. Many times the reseller, MSP, or solutions provider will make up the cost over a 12 to 18 month period of time, and then it would be all income to your bottom line after that. Another downside or potential issue is that many resellers and MSPs aren't really skilled or adept at looking at the credit of their clients to best determine who will be low risk and who will end up being high risk. So they sometimes make mistakes and offer credit to customers who end up not being good credit risks. Today, many resellers, MSPs, and technology solution providers are finding other creative ways to get around the issues that are potential downsides to hardware as a service. Some partner with a bank or for a line of credit, or they might use a credit card to better enable them to purchase the inventory needed to rent to customers. This is typically more scalable for an MSP who doesn't have the cash on hand to buy and rent the equipment. However, you can run into issues with scaling if your bank or your credit card company places a cap on what they'll lend you. You, the reseller or MSP, also bear all the risk. If your customer goes out of business, you could be stuck holding the bag for the equipment purchases and payments. Some manufacturers of hardware and equipment offer their own as-a-service program, specifically for resellers in the MSP market. They provide a limited way for you to offer hardware as a service. For many of these programs, the reseller or the MSP pays the manufacturer on a monthly basis for however many pieces of equipment that are needed. Then you would mark up the cost on each unit and you would rent it to your customer. A challenge you might have with this type of program, however, is that there will still be hardware and software elements of your total solution that may not be part of that monthly payment to the manufacturer. A lease is another good alternative to hardware as a service. A lease can be a perfect way to lower your upfront costs, but there are a few trade-offs. If you use a third-party leasing company, consider the fact that your customer will still have to pay 2 separate monthly invoices for the total solution. Very inconvenient. Also, in a traditional lease, you typically don't have as much control over what happens at the end of the agreement. Your customer can pay off the lease with the finance company and then dump you for a competitor. Another option is hardware as a rental. This is an alternative to hardware as a service, and it came about because of the challenges that I've described with hardware as a service. Hardware as a rental incorporates some of the best elements of hardware as a service, but it also removes some of the challenges or downsides. Similar to a traditional lease, you get paid for the hardware, the software, and the installation up front, making you cash flow positive from day one. The nuance here is that the financing company will also bill your managed services and your cloud monthly fees along with the equipment payment. Your branding is on the invoice, which is important, so the customer knows who that bill is coming from on a monthly basis. The reseller or the managed service provider has control over what happens at the end of the agreement. According to data that's been tracked, customers who are on this type of a program tend to upgrade their equipment after 3 years, many times without significantly altering or changing their monthly IT spending. So we at Jenne have a partnership, as you know, with Digium and also a third-party company called Great America. And we have been working on introducing a program. We have a video here that I'd like to show everyone.
Digium's Unified Communications as a rental program consolidates the costs for hardware, hosted platforms, SIP trunking, installation and maintenance, and managed services while increasing your recurring stream of revenue with a complete solution. Whether you're offering Switchvox Cloud or Switchvox On-Premise, now you can offer your customers the option to make an easy, affordable, and predictable single monthly payment for their Digium products and services. You'll get paid up front, and Jenne and Great America will send you the recurring charges monthly when a customer makes their payment. Digium's UC as a rental program offers you greater flexibility to provide installation according to your customers' needs, and they'll have greater freedom to get the very best solutions to fit their business. Often, Digium's UC as a rental program proves to be even less expensive than a cloud solution. And with its added flexibility and predictability, it can increase the chance your customers will upgrade their technology before experiencing any problems. The UC as a rental program also allows for complete integration of Digium Switchvox and all of Digium's IP phones, letting you easily add additional hardware to your customers' environments and help their growing organizations adapt to change. By providing a simple pricing model and pairing it with the many advanced features integrated into every Digium system, UC as a rental provides you with the right tools and much needed flexibility to close on higher margin opportunities and start increasing your recurring stream of revenue.
So now I'm going to introduce Frank Yuhasz. He is a business development manager with Jenne who specializes with Digium. And Frank is going to talk us through a typical customer example of how this might look and work for a 100-seat opportunity.
Thanks, Susan. So how many folks here do some sort of cloud service, whether it's hopefully through Digium, but how many would have like a data center? You could raise your hands. Data center, you'd have to bill it. You've got hardware costs and things like that. What Susan talked about with the finance end of it is you either have to have a company that helps you kind of roll everything into one payment, or if you are doing maybe a traditional cloud, you're kind of limited as to what recurring revenue that you would get. With the HaaS program, talked to a few resellers regarding it, and so if you have the data center, you would need basically subscriptions, you'd need the reg code, the hardware, of course, but then you try to figure out, okay, what else goes into this without having to give the customer 2 different invoices per month. With Great America, they can roll in any kind of hardware costs, installation costs, managed service costs, things like that. And with your typical 100-user system, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood, if you're doing the Switchvox, you're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of about, and I'm just going to ballpark it, about $20K. And then you have to figure in your monthly SIP trunking, so that's an added cost to it. The payments are very similar, whether you would purchase and put it in their data closet and get your SIP trunks, or if you host it in your own data center. But with that, some people buy a payment. So if your payment is, or when we calculate everything, if it's not quite there, there are ways with a financing company like Great America that you can add some points in the front, make a little bit more there, also possibly add any other managed services into it and get one bill. You don't have to worry about billing it every month. It has your name on there. So either one is very close in price, but it's not terribly complicated. So I'm not sure if anyone has questions, I'd be more than happy to talk offline regarding it.
Okay, we'll have time for some questions at the end. So thank you, Frank. So how do you best position and sell the concept of monthly payments, regardless of whether you decide for your business model hardware as a service is the way to go, or a program like hardware as a rental? you need to go through a financial discovery process with your prospects and your customers. A first question that you might ask them is, how are you consuming your current technology? This is a great financial discovery question that can really help flesh out the customer's acquisition strategy from a financial perspective for their business. So you should be listening for a couple of things in their response. If your customer is talking about owning, capitalizing, or depreciating it, then you'll follow up with questions to drill down on why those things are important to them. Response number one might be, they would say, I want to own it for depreciation. An acceptable answer sounds something like, we want to own the asset to get the benefits of ownership, mainly depreciation to reduce our taxable income. So this is a good opportunity to inform the customer that on a $1 buyout lease, the end user is viewed as the owner of the technology, not the reseller or the MSP. That means that the end user will get the benefits of ownership, such as depreciation, and reduce their taxable income while consuming their capital. Response number two could be something like, that's just how we've always done it. A famous quote that I like from Henry Ford comes to mind when thinking about that response. Henry Ford is known for saying, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So customers, as we all know, aren't always right. It's you as the trusted technology advisor who should help guide them along to making the right decision based on their unique circumstances. This is the reason that you would go through the financial discovery process to begin with, so that you can better understand which financial solution is going to address both their short-term and their long-term goals and needs. A second question is, do you want to own the technology or do you want to use the technology? Chances are they will ask, well, what do you mean by that? And then you can respond, let's face it, having up-to-date technology that creates efficiencies in your business and allows you to utilize it as a competitive advantage is a must. In this day and age, you have to have it. However, technology, as we know, is a depreciating asset whose value will decline over time. The value of depreciating assets is not in owning them, but in using them. With this question and the conversation that follows, you are gauging your customer or prospect's potential interest and then laying the groundwork for them to begin to think about monthly payments and the benefit of monthly payments to their business. So this will help warm them up to the option when you bring it up later in the conversation. A third question is, what percentage of your monthly revenues do you want to dedicate to leveraging technology as a competitive advantage? Most companies aren't going to know the answer to this question, but if they do, then you'll know you're working with a very savvy company. Reason number one might be consistently mentioning monthly payments. First, you're shifting their mind frame to beginning to think about the monthly payment model. Reason number two, show them technology is a competitive advantage. You're giving them a chance to think of technology as more than just a means to an end. You've positioned their technology as a competitive advantage to their business, and they should be grateful to you for helping them along that road. Detail not just the features of your technology solution, but how do the features translate into tangible benefits for the customer's business. Reason number three is to discover cost savings for them. Finally, their response here will help you discover what their old technology may be costing their business because they don't have your streamlined, up-to-date solution. Oftentimes, the cost of downtime issues, lack of productivity, is less than the monthly payment for your solution, which in the end makes it a real money saver. So, in summary, reviewing the different models, a monthly payment model does have many benefits to both you and your customer. Hardware as a service does have pros and cons that we went over. To reiterate, the pros are increased margins on hardware and service. It can help improve your customer stickiness and traction. It can help standardize your customer base, and it creates and improves monthly recurring revenue. Some of the cons are that it is cash flow intensive to keep buying hardware and equipment. Many technology solutions providers, MSPs, resellers aren't really skilled at looking at their customers' credit to determine whether they are high risk or low risk. Some of the alternatives that we talked about include a bank financing, a credit card, the various manufacturer programs that you might discover, and then also hardware as a rental through a company such as Great America or another financing company.
Just to add to that, Great America will also, upon your customer signing, they will pay the upfront hardware costs. So up to 75% of the total cost of the deal is paid to you to go to the hardware costs and your administrative costs. Once the project's complete, you get your balance of 25%, and from there on, you get the monthly recurring revenue for the SIP trunks as well. So it's not up to you to decide as far as their credit risk. It's up to Great America to do that, and they kind of take that off of you, also taking the credit risk to your company as well, so you don't have to extend yourself out because they're using end user credit info. So
Fantastic.
Are there any questions?
Yes.
All right.
I have so many questions. So,
That's why I brought Frank, because he's good at answering questions.
so SIP trunks, for example, that's a regulated type of billing situation. Is Great America doing that?
It's a pass-through. So hopefully you'll be using the Digium SIP trunks, and it would be a pass-through at that point, so you don't have to worry about. I think you're going towards like the FCC and
Yeah, all the
you wanna
state
make
and
sure-
FCC
Yes.
regulated types of fees.
Yes,
So they're billing what?
they're billing the different components. So obviously the hardware component.
So let's say that
SIP
I am a
trunks-
SIP trunk provider myself. I would have to do it on my own. I couldn't do it through Great America because, or they could pass my charges through. How does it work?
Yes, they could.
Okay.
They could pass your charges through, yes.
Yeah, so it gives you an opportunity to put a lot of different components together. To
In
do
the
that.
interest of full disclosure, I'm one of the engineering folks at Digium, if you don't know me, so just take this with a grain of salt. Because I'm actually very interested in Michael's same line of questioning, actually. How does that work? Because as the guy who actually has produced some of the invoice code, let's say you get your invoicing from Digium, hopefully, for SIP trunk. Do they take that PDF or that thing and then roll it up and they recalculate it in an actual monthly billing thing? Or are they looking for an actual data flow coming out? Is Gail sending them a spreadsheet? Like I'm just wondering, like from a mechanics for Great America, how are they consuming that SIP trunk billing data to actually roll that up into the overall package?
So that billing data would go directly to them, and they would have that calculated based on, if you're looking at a unlimited consumption model, you're not going to have very much fluctuation in the invoice. So they would be able to calculate that out.
Okay, so generally it's not the metered SIP trunks, generally it's the channelized?
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct. You can do a metered version that would be on top of that, but then you're looking at the two invoices again. You kind of want to just boil it down to one invoice. And I know that's, some folks look at the unlimited as maybe sometimes if you have a smaller company, it's not going to be, sensitive enough for them.
So there's a lot of free phones being given out there. And I know that Digium offers that as well, low-end phones. So this is an attractive concept that people, I think, need to look at because it's a common thing in the marketplace. The cable companies give you a free Polycom 410 now, many of them Comcast, for example. So we can't ignore it. So 3 years goes by, if that's a typical time frame for a lot of leases. And this is not a lease, it's a rental. So the phones then are given back, and to whom? And then what happens?
So it is a rental. So with the rental portion, you all would own the equipment when it's all done. Unlike a lease where they would pay like $1 buyout and then they could do it, throw your equipment away and go with someone else that maybe appeals to them more. So it is your equipment at the end of the termination. As far as phones going back to anyone, it would go back to you.
So then we are actually renting, not the customer.
Correct. They are paying a rental fee.
They're paying our bill. So we are the
Yes.
renter, and the customer is paying Great America on our behalf to pay our obligation. At the end, the equipment is ours because it was in our name.
Yes.
That's an interesting concept.
Yes.
Yes. And that's where I've had a
Okay.
lot of resellers. When you say you own it at the end, I mean, at that point, we all know you have a reg code. You could turn around, if they decide to do something else, you could turn around and have that reg code.
Of course, use it for someone else, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then if they want to renew, then it's up to us to redo the lease, or the rental, excuse me, and do maybe 3 more years with new phones because they want something fancy new,
Yes.
but the payment stays the same. What's happening at the end of 3 years if the customer wants to keep using those same phones? Are the partners supposed to probably reduce that bill, or does it stay the same? What's the deal?
So that would depend on you. If you wanted to lower their bill, most folks would, if they're happy with their payment.
Everyone forgets
Yep.
what it was all about, and they just keep paying the same
Yep.
bill. Why would they reduce their bill?
Exactly. Exactly.
So
And
then
that-
Great
and that's-
America, so then, okay, so now what happens? Great America is no longer involved in the equation. They don't have to be.
They would keep paying you. They would still do your billing as long as that contract stayed in place.
So Great America is now taking the full same payment from the customer, but keeping less of it. All of it passes through, or is there a management fee that comes off the top?
There's a management fee that they have up front, and that's calculated in the interest rate up front. So they would get their portion of that on your equipment.
But 3 years goes by, and then what happens? Do we get 100% of the payment, or is there still some amount that's taken out after 3 years? There's no more obligation, the lease is over. It's really a lease, we know that. So then what happens at the end?
They would keep billing it. As far as any kind of their admin costs, I would assume, I know what happens when you do that, but I can get you the answer to that question. You would get the payment. So that's, once they fulfill their obligation, it's much like any of the other contracts that you'd have. You just keep paying it, same price.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
One side to the other, back and forth.
I might be showing like the fact that I'm on the engineering side, so just bear with me for a second. It's a very interesting model because obviously with the cloud-based model, it's recurring revenue. There's businesses who adopt a cloud-based model, software as a service, go into the recurring revenue trough, and it's something you plan for and you do the whole thing. This feels very interesting because it's sort of almost like a hybrid, if I'm characterizing it properly, between like the traditional get everything up front prem-based model. So is this? Do you guys view this as sort of a way of softening the blow on the transition to a recurring revenue model for the MSPs and resellers? Do you foresee people doing this for a while and then eventually transitioning into a full-blown cloud agent sort of thing where they're doing all recurring, or is this just sort of something that helps them move into more of a recurring revenue business model?
So I would look at it more of, you want them to stay in that recurring model. Susan showed you the S-curve. Those, different components that go into that helps you all keep having a continuing revenue stream. But I forgot the second part of your question.
It's more about, for me, I think I'm just curious about, sorry.
It-
I'm curious about, we, at Digium, we've had a number of people become Cloud Master agents. You were Cloud Master agent resellers, for the cloud side, and then there's, the traditional Switchvox prem reseller channel. And this feels very interesting because it feels like almost a stepping stone maybe from one to the other. And I'm just wondering, is that sort of the intended purpose of it, or was it providing just a different way of approaching, that sales channel?
I think it could be both, a little bit of both. It depends on the business model and background of the individual reseller or MSP. You have, companies that are at different stages in their life cycle. I think it's a great model, particularly for a traditional, what you call maybe legacy reseller who's trying to figure out what is this cloud all about, how do I get into it? Everybody's talking about monthly recurring payments, but I'm set up and I'm geared for selling a hardware solution. That's my expertise. So it's a way to make a transition.
And I think your point, you made the point, and I think it's very valid, that going completely from, collecting everything up front to a recurring revenue model, that's hard.
It's
right?
very
You
challenging.
go out of business very quickly if you just do that overnight. Right, I agree.
And just to reiterate further with the stuff I've worked with Ryan from Great America, you look at a cloud payment, and I am sort of suggesting a white label, but when you look at the hardware or the data center costs, it's actually much lower than you would think versus you're going all in for cloud because it's either your data center or you're putting the equipment in their data closet. So it tends to be, without getting too specific, about half the cost. And that cost, Gail, cover your ears. That cost, if your typical Digium on a 3-year contract is $28.99 for 1 to 19 users, you're about half of that. So if you were trying to beat that number or any other number like that, you can do that very easily. It keeps the customer very sticky to you because maybe they've been offered, a seat cost of $30, and if you can come in at $20 and your equipment costs and all your other admin costs are only $12 or $13, not to make it sound like a car thing, but if you tell them if your customer tells you a certain payment they're looking for, you can probably get there in a hurry and make extra margin.
The margins are enormous.
Yes.
No question about it. So why must the customer know that Great America exists? Why can't I use them and I lease my equipment from them for 3 years or whatever the number is, and I bill my customers the regular monthly bill, including phones, and so be it? Why get them involved with the customer?
You would just need to be the Great America partner, Michael,
you
at
are.
that point.
The bill they get has your
Yes.
company information and branding.
customer hearing about that.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't, because it's going to be your invoice that comes in. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Michael's getting down to when they apply, it's going to have Great America, or maybe it's underwritten by Great America.
But that's your, positioned as your financing
Yeah.
partner.
Yeah, back channel to me. So I'm interested. You had me at hello. But it's more about using Great America as a tool in my back pocket. I write them a check. They fund me to buy the phones from Jenne, of course. And I rent the phones to my customer, and the customer has a LeBlanc bill that came from me, has nothing to do with Great America. I don't want them messing with my customers. The most important thing I've learned in business in the last few years is the company who sends the bill to the customer and collects the check from the customer is in the driver's seat. I don't want anyone getting between me and the customer. That's my approach.
Yep.
Yeah, very sensible. Any other questions for either Susan or Frank? No? No? Okay, well, thank you so
Otherwise,
much,
you
guys.
can
Yeah,
track
otherwise,
us down. We're around.
Absolutely track them down and
Yeah.
ask any questions.
All right. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Allison.
Appreciate it.